January 17th meeting of the Colman City Council to order. And first item is to talk about agenda.
Recording in progress.
And I think we'll probably allow those people to speak when the time comes up, whether they're here or not. So those people that you mentioned there. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda other than allowing people from the public to speak and they'll allow a turn?
Noting that, I would move approval of the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On the consent agenda, we need to preface this with a couple of comments. First of all, thanks to all the council members for getting back to me so quickly. Secondly, thanks for, I think I was able to accommodate every single member's requests. And the third thing I didn't mention is that recognize that we're one person short and that we may need to pull, we'll see about possibly pulling something away from a person here to get that other person engaged when that time comes. So that's what I want to preface my comments on with regard to the consent agenda. Other than that, I'll let it fly.
I do have a question.
Yes.
For example, last couple of years, Deb and I both were on the finance committee. Does that mean, does she remain on the finance committee with me? Or am I alone, the only function of our finance committee?
No, I think so pending, instead of putting two people on each one of these committees while we still have an empty council spot, we would put, and Tom kind of indicated that you put one person on each one of the committees right now, and then whether or not that goes to an appointment or through a special election, then we can go back in and add a second person depending on where that individual would like to be here.
Okay.
Opinion-wise, it's not going to adversely affect staff yet. The fire department is the only one currently that's coming up per se, and then personnel committee, but probably get the budget before we get any of that complete.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Don't read anything negative to the appointment. Said I had to make a decision about this.
With that, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Deb. And speaking of that, Doug, are we all squared away?
You're good.
Technology-wise. No public hearing, no orders for approval, but if this is appropriate at this time, can we go back to the communications side? Is it Colman?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to go back to the item C, communications, and Colman, introduce yourself and any question about
Good evening. Thank you very much. Sorry about the wrong location. Us millennials rely on Google Maps to get you every time. My name is Colman Silbernagel. I'm from Vinton, and I'm running for state senate. I grew up on a dairy farm where my parents taught me how to work, whether it was stacking hay bales in 110-degree hay mows, or picking rock, or feeding calves. I learned that when there's work to be done, it doesn't get done unless somebody does it. After high school, I graduated from St. John's University, earned a degree in history, and a commission in the United States Army. The military reinforced those same values of hard work, dedication, and perseverance. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 as a remote clearance platoon leader, which meant that my men and I were responsible for searching for improvised explosive devices. Hardly the safest job in the world, but by the grace of God, we all returned home safely. I finished my military service in May of 2019 as a captain, and I now work remotely as a data analyst for one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. I'm running for state senate because I'm a dad. I have two boys, 4 and 2, the eldest of which is in preschool. I think it's critical that we continue making the historic investments that we've made in students so that my son and all of his peers across the state can go to fantastic schools. I'm running for state senate because I love small towns. Living in 5 states in 7 years in the military was certainly challenging, but it did expose me to some new ideas. One of which was a program in Kansas called Red Tire, which is a portmanteau of redefining retirement. That program is run by the University of Kansas, and it seeks to pair recent graduates with small-town business owners who don't have identified successors. As we know, when businesses in small towns close, that can have a detrimental, sometimes drastically detrimental effect on the health of the community and its vibrancy. Programs like Red Tiger help new graduates to get jobs and help small towns to continue to thrive. There's a lot more that I could say, but out of respect for the agenda, I'll stop here. If you'd like to learn more, please visit my website, colmania.com, COLMANIA.com. I'll be around after the meeting as well. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other public comments at this point? We will move on to resolutions for approval. G1, resolution 1-17-22A, public hearing for the city of Mount Vernon fiscal year maximum property tax dollars. Chris, you want to start us off with that?
This is a requirement 3 years in the making, I believe. It was considered a transparency bill. We already hold one public hearing on our property tax levy, but this is basically a resolution and public hearing that will identify what our max property tax dollars will be, and if we increase property taxes or value goes by 2%, and we have to justify why we're doing that. So our levy rate is staying at $12.99. Our value did, however, increase by about 7%. So there will be a comment in that resolution justifying why. But I welcome the news at 7%. We've been under 2% for the last 3 years. So this is just setting the public hearing.
Is there a motion or any questions for Chris? I'll send that date.
I move approval of resolution 1-17-2022A, setting a public hearing for the maximum property tax values for the city of Mount Vernon.
I'll second.
Move and second. Any further discussion or questions? Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sue?
Turler,
Yeah, aye.
West,
Yes.
Vernon,
yes,
Rose,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thanks for that reminder, Sue. Moving on to number 2, visiting the Sun's official newspaper publication of the city of Mount Vernon. Are you cutting right? Anything to add, Chris?
No, just a resolution we do every 2 years.
Sure. Use the Gazette? Can you reference the Gazette as a
We use the Gazette in an emergency situation only because the Sun is published once a week, but I can count probably on one hand the amount of times it's happened in over 6 years here.
All right, I will move to approve resolution 1-17-2022B, designating the Sun as the official newspaper for publications for the city of Mount Vernon.
Thank you, Steph. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Any further questions or discussion about this resolution? Then we're ready to vote.
Rose,
Yes.
Turler,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Vernon,
yes,
Motion carries.
yes.
Thank you, Deb.
So, hey, Tom,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Tom,
Jamaica?
Tom,
Yes.
I get a lot of feedback every time Chris moves his papers to the point that I can't hear anybody else. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay, just checking, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, it's all right.
We want you to engage.
Must have a really good mic.
New batteries in all of them.
We're going to the next item. Approving transfers for the fiscal year 2021-22. Chris explained that pretty well. Anything to add?
No, really, like I say, the largest 2 transfers that we have are for previous projects. One is for the new truck, in case anybody got a chance to see that. Came in mighty handy this past weekend. But that's 2 years in the making. We ordered that piece of equipment 2 years ago, so we're just and then closing out the UV disinfection portion of phase 1 of the sewer plant. And the member of the council agreed to do the additional clarifier work at the time, so it's transfer funds into to cover those expenses.
Is there any questions? Is there a move?
I move approval of resolution 1-17-2022C, approving transfers for fiscal year 2021-2022.
And I'll second.
Thank you, Deb. Any further questions or discussion? Otherwise, we're ready to vote.
West.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to G4, resolution approving the final plat of Vernon Acres, first edition, Lynn County, Iowa. I think I now know where it's at.
This is just inside our 2-mile review. Staff and planning commission had very few concerns at this time. We will be keeping an eye on, this is kind of an elongated piece of property that does run along Abbey View Road, so we will keep an eye on trying to continue this pattern of adding a lot here and adding a lot there. But the owners and the engineer are understanding that the first lot's kind of a free one, and then subsequent last one questions.
The fact that we had this is probably a result of a discussion from several years ago with our relationship with the county to be notified or be aware of, and our planning and zoning people are aware of activity of this nature within a 2-mile of our border, if I remember correctly. So this is good to know that this activity is going on out there. But this is in the form of a resolution. Are there any questions? Chris, about it? Steph?
I'm going to choose to abstain from the vote because my employer is represented.
What made?
Unless there are other further questions or concerns, I move approval of Resolution 1-17-2022D, approving the final plat of Vernon Acres, first edition to Lynn County, Iowa.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Act on the final plat of Vernon Acres, first edition, Lynn County. We're ready to vote. Sue, if you call the roll.
Herman. Turner.
Yeah.
Rose.
Yes.
And you reflect the absence, right? And G5, resolution establishing the city of Mount Vernon's official position on the Navigator Heartland Greenway CO2 pipeline. While Chris talks about this, I'm going to add another exhibit that came in late that I was not able to distribute to anybody, Chris or anybody. I'll start with Steph down here. This is a description of the location of it in relation to some property owners and some historic sites on the west side of Mount Vernon. I'll pass it over to those guys.
So the resolution that you have in front of you is kind of a culmination of multiple organizations with our city attorney's touch. Mainly, I think from what I can tell from the Farm Bureau and many of the counties that have already filed a resolution or a position paper against the Navigator pipeline, many of them are speaking out against the use of eminent domain, which this resolution does as well. However, we have more significant concerns with the location being right on our western border. Number one, that's growth area number one for the city. So based upon our comp plan, that's where we are estimating our development to occur in the future. Number two, we've had little communication, we've had zero communication from the developers of Navigator as this relates to the dangers or potential response mechanisms that the city of Mount Vernon would have to potentially put into place. So that all of those items that we've talked about kind of over the last couple of meetings are in this resolution. This resolution would then be signed by the mayor and passed to the Iowa Utilities Board to be put on the record as a formal position of the city of Mount Vernon. There's obviously still a lot that has to happen with the Navigator pipeline. They have their approval that has to be made, but for us, I think it's vital looking at the location. Mount Vernon, Story City, there's a few others, Springville maybe, where this pipeline doesn't necessarily navigate through the community, and it's, I think, done obviously intentionally, so they don't have to involve communities, but they skirt the city limits as close as they humanly can without having to notify those involved. So I can tell you there is a movement afoot. I spent about an hour on the phone with the city manager from Story City. I'm going to share this resolution with them. Should it pass. Obviously, if you go on the Navigator site, there's a number of counties, a number of communities, and a number of cities or individuals that have already submitted position papers to Iowa Utilities Board. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this thing stops, but it does at least get our formal position.
As mentioned at the last meeting, the way I think the city officially found out about it was through a property owner, Josh Enoch.
Yeah.
And in the last couple of days, I see pipeline number 3 is being proposed from ADM, South Cedar Rapids, to Clinton, to southern Illinois as well, with rumors of another, a fourth and a fifth one coming up through Iowa. So we're addressing this one obviously towards the Heartland, the Navigator Heartland Greenway. Western Iowa also has another one going to the North Dakota fields, but this is our concern. I'm not sure I've ever seen as much public input at meetings that I've been invited to on this issue, with people feeling strongly about it. And this is between meetings with the supervisors, Iowa Utilities Board, and as many emails and exhibits about this project. One of our, she's not a citizen, she's in our school district, Jessica Wiskus, has been a point person on this in several counties. And, obviously feels strong about it, but this is one of those rare times when the Farm Bureau, quite honestly, is aligned with organizations like Sierra Club and things like that. So that's kind of makes it interesting. So that's the background, and you could say that it doesn't directly affect us now, and that's probably true, but I also want to take into consideration the emergency services that we provide and what level we have now, and what we have to do if there's a pipeline rupture. Go ahead.
No, that's kind of the information that they've neglected to or not bothered to share with us at this point. Many of these pipelines have or require evacuation plans, first responder plans. Even none of this information has been shared. There's obviously literature on the internet as it relates to ruptures and accidents where citizens became sick. You know, one side will point that out, the other side will try to point out why there are special circumstances behind that. But you know, without any of the representatives from that company sharing that information directly with us or even bothering to meet with the city, doesn't give me good feelings about how information is going to be shared moving forward should this occur. Mayor Wieser made a good point. There is a third pipeline that was just announced last week that ADM is proposing.
Announced by who? Curious.
Sorry?
Announced by who? Just curious. I'm just curious how you found out about that.
Through the Gazette.
Pardon?
Through the Gazette.
Okay.
The governor has been fairly coy about her position on CO2 pipelines and her support or non-support. So I, as opposed to waiting for them to make an effort to reach out to us, from a staff perspective, I have every concern that is in here. And would ask the council to at least put a position out there. And again, it may not prevent things, it might get them to look at the route, it could prevent from being constructed. So I think it we at least have to do our part in this process.
It is within the 2 mile.
For 200 feet.
What we call,
I want to say within a quarter to a half mile. It's definitely within a half mile of the schools, it looks like.
which, so my point is, we have jurisdictionally, we have a way to voice in on any development, correct?
No, well, not exactly, because we have 2 mile review of subdivisions.
Okay.
But it is within our urban growth area. I hope that the Iowa Utilities Board will take that into consideration given the proximity. This isn't the first time that a pipeline's been proposed like this, and it's either not been done or they moved the pipeline to get it further away from communities. That's not necessarily what we're asking here. We're asking for them to take a step back, rethink what they're attempting to do with this pipeline in general. So, legally, I think based upon this resolution and all the items that are listed in here, should a suit be filed, I think the city would have standing because of the proximity.
Plan a way to meeting to get full legal counsel on how to frame this and how to include all the clauses that we needed to have here. So hopefully that's, even though that was our intent to do this 2 weeks ago, I think we're better served now by what we have in front of us. And it still comes down to 3 votes on the Iowa Utilities Board, which may listen to the public, may not, but at least go on record. What is the role of council on this issue?
Well,
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I mean, I think to your point, it's not within city limits, so, we don't have a direct say, but it's the same reason that we just reviewed the Brandon subdivision, right? We have to, if we take a long view of council, it's not what's happening today or tomorrow, it's what's happening 50 years from now. And if we, as we grow, as we have that 7% in this past year, we need to look beyond our borders. And I think considering the public safety and the folks that we ask to go deal with this sort of stuff when it goes sideways, we've got to consider that as well. So I'm in favor of the resolution as presented.
I think it's right for us to take an official stance. I will move to approve resolution 1-17. Oh, I'm sorry.
Further discussion?
I apologize.
I'm in full support of this. I would ask that we make our, in the spirit of working together with the Farm Bureau, who has in the past worked toward, I would say, some counterproductive measures, speaking specifically about the interurban bicycle trail that has been proposed years ago between Mount Vernon and Cedar Rapids, and the Farm Bureau and their members have been opposed and thwarted that effort. And in doing so, I believe directly have hurt the community of Mount Vernon from an economic standpoint. Bike trails are not new. They're very lucrative from an economic standpoint for small communities. You can look at Ely, Solon, Center Point, Robbins, the list goes on. And we've been shut out of that because of barriers put up, like, again, the Farm Bureau and their members out west between here and Cedar Rapids. And so I would just ask that we make that clear, that we support them in this effort for our own reasons, but also in support of their reasons. But we're going to need some support to help us economically as well. Because without a thriving community in Mount Vernon, our rural neighbors, they won't have the same quality of life as we do today. So, thank you.
Paul. And it is a qualified issue, too.
Thank you.
So I think we have a motion.
Yep.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I will add here that being new to this role, I'm going to try to read resolutions that are under a page and not read for the record this 2 pages.
Fair enough.
That's, unless that's standard right now. And motion on the floor for a resolution establishing the city of Mount Vernon's official position on the Navigator Heartland Greenway CO2 pipeline. We're ready to vote. Sue?
Rose,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Herman, Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to mayoral proclamations. Proclamation establishing the month of January Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month. I believe we have a speaker, Teresa Davidson, to address this time.
Do you have the proclamation you can read it?
Yes, and I'll start that out. All the council members have it as well, but I will read it here. It's establishes the month of January 2022 as Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month. Whereas human trafficking is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. It is found in the United States most often in the form of sexual exploitation, forced labor, and debt bondage. And whereas human trafficking is one of the world's fastest growing crimes, whose growth was only accelerated by the pandemic due to isolation, economic hardship, migration, increasing abuse, and online activity. The anti-human trafficking program at Mercy Medical Center in Cedar Rapids saw a 26% increase in referrals in 2020 and a 59% increase in 2021 as compared to 2019. And whereas prosecutions for this horrific crime, which denies human dignity and freedom, fuels organized crime, have decreased during the pandemic, with the Iowa North District convicting only 1 trafficker in 2020. And whereas even though awareness of this crime is growing, human trafficking continues to be amiss and or to go unreported due to its isolating nature, misunderstanding of its definition, the misdiagnosis of its indicators, and whereas every business, community organization, faith community, family, and individual can make a difference by working to protect the vulnerable within their sphere of influence, by addressing the problem of internet sex trafficking and pornography, choosing products that are not made by forced labor, and by becoming more aware of the problem and possible solutions. And whereas the City of Mount Vernon joins Chains Interrupted, Mercy Medical Center, and St. Luke's Hospital in their dedication to providing community outreach and education, legislative advocacy, training, promoting of services to survivors of human trafficking in collaboration with law enforcement. Now therefore, I, Thomas M. Weisler, Mayor of Mount Vernon, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of January as Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month, and encourage all of our citizens to become more informed of this growing problem, to be vigilant and report suspicious activity, and to work towards solutions to end trafficking in all forms in our community. If you see something that doesn't look right, reach out to Chains Interrupted at 319-364-0222, or the Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the seal of the City of Mount Vernon this 17th day of January 2022. My signature. That is the proclamation. Would you like to speak towards it?
I need to push anything?
Yep, the button up top. You're good.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Davidson, and I'm co-founder of Chains Interrupted and also the Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator at Mercy Medical Center. And standing with me in solidarity are members of Chains Interrupted, Mercy Medical Center, and St. Luke's Hospital. And we are just so excited, and thank you, Mayor, as well as City Council, for reading and signing this proclamation and joining us in this effort. And on behalf of those who are still victimized and are also trying to regain their lives after being victimized by this, we just thank you so much, and we are looking very much forward to continuing to work with you. My address is Ely, but my school district is Mount Vernon, And so my children have attended schools here. I've worked with Chief Shannon closely in the field of anti-human trafficking, working together in schools to prevent or to present prevention education to our youngsters. The City of Mount Vernon Police Department serves on the Eastern Iowa Regional Task Force at Mercy Medical Center. So we're already making some very good strides in this field, and I appreciate that. So again, I thank you so much for this exciting opportunity to, just continue to partner here. And if you'll please forgive us, we have another proclamation in Ely that we need to sneak out to. So we don't want to be rude, but we do need to.
Thank you, and Chief Shannon introduced, talked about your, what you wanted to proclaim tonight and everything and so on. And this and the topic that preceded this is maybe that falls outside of the normal purview and outside the normal scope of what the city council would normally address. But I think it reflects on the fact that we are citizens of a larger community, and is very important for us to engage on issues like the last one, and very important to engage on issues like this current one. So I think this is an easy thing to get on record on, and thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the awareness and drive safe.
Thank you.
Got the water tower fixing it, Oops, wrong subject to bring up. In the overall proclamation, there's nothing to add to that. Just want to make sure we're all okay there. Ready to move on to the motion for approval. Claims list, motion approved. We'll get the last one from Sue this afternoon.
I move approval.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. Ready to vote on the claims list? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Deborah, on motions for approval number 2, discussion and consideration of COVID-related issues and policies. Council action as needed. Anything new to add?
No, the last few months have been, at best, I would consider confusing times. Conflicting information coming out from all levels of government. Obviously, at 9.14, the 7-day positivity rate for our area code is as high as it's ever been. Mount Vernon Community School District issued new guidelines stating they were going to follow the CDC recommended guidelines on January 12th. For anybody that is aware, we were going to use this time to at least have a discussion about the OSHA emergency ruling. However, that was recently struck down by the Supreme Court, so there's, at this time, no point to speak on it further. We were taking steps, however, to comply. We would have had to comply until May, I believe, when we started hiring pool employees back. But yeah, it's been a crazy 2 weeks since the last one.
Our most public building probably is LBC as far as 256 people a day, or whatever the number was. Are you getting any pushback, or one way or the other, to LBC? I see more people wear masks there.
We are not getting any pushback, no, not like we used to. A few more people are wearing masks now than they were maybe 2 weeks ago, but nothing significant. We do have some staff members that are wearing masks more often. Nothing like it used to be.
Anyone else feel any need for some action here at this point? Not, we'll move on. Did I basically take care of J3 already?
No, this is this is setting a public hearing for the budget amendment. Earlier you set a public hearing for the max property tax dollars, and you have to pass a resolution for that one. You do not for this.
One note, the February 2 is a Wednesday. I believe it should be February 7th.
Be correct.
just for when we get off. We're using the Gazette as an emergency publication.
We're going to make a motion on that.
So this is a standard budget amendment,
Correct.
setting a public hearing date.
Yes.
Having said that, I'd move approval of setting the public hearing date for budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2022 as the first meeting in February, the 7th, 2022.
Thank you, Scott.
Second.
Thank you, Deb. Any questions about it? Pretty self-explanatory. If you're ready to vote on the motion, setting a public hearing date for budget amendment number 1, fiscal year 22, on February 7th. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion consideration of filling a city council vacancy. Council action as needed.
So this has happened once since I've been here, and the third time. Probably the fifth time this has happened to me in my career. But we do have a vacancy. The law requires us to identify, council to identify how you want to fill that vacancy. So your options are fairly simple. You can either appoint, or you can proceed to a special election. In either situation, the candidates have to fulfill the same requirements essentially as you would being a candidate running for office at any other time.
Which are basically living in the city
Yes.
and being old enough to vote, right?
Correct. The appointment process is obviously the most, the easiest route for everybody involved, and the cheapest route because you're not paying for a special election, which the city does have to do if one has to be held. The last time this happened was Councilperson Christensen resigned his council seat. At that time, we had citizens that stated that they were going to petition regardless of the appointment. So one of the items with an appointment, obviously, is if somebody can petition up to 14 days after the appointment is made. So there's a 2-week lag period where a petition can still be submitted to hold a special election, which just elongates the process. Good news is, it used to be, once the appointment or special election took place, that it was only good until the next election. The person that would get appointed or win a special election in this case will get to serve out the remaining 2 years of the term.
So they'd be part of the standard ballot of November 2023, correct?
Yes. So, depending on what you choose tonight, I have to notify the auditor's office of what our choice is. If you do decide to go by appointment, then we would have to put a notice in the paper. 10 and 20 days is the requirement for this, and people can submit their names. The council has the ability at that point in the appointment process to do kind of however they would like to handle it. They can do more formal interviews in a council setting and then make the appointment after. You can request that they put a position paper in so that you've got something to read. I mean, there's a number of things that you can do as part of the appointment process.
Does that portion of the process need to be part of the 10 and 20-day notice?
No.
Get 2 days, but
What you could do is say we would like to appoint, and then tonight you can, as part of the discussion, you can inform those candidates, because they would have to identify themselves prior to the meeting. And I would just let them know that you would prefer to get something in writing, a position statement in writing prior to the meeting, if they're interested in being considered for the appointment. All but one of the processes that I've gone through, the appointment has only had one individual step forward. In one case, I had 3. So they did, council at that time did kind of a formal interview, question and answer, and then voted to make the appointment that night as well.
Yes, that held in a public session.
Correct.
Has Mount Vernon set a precedent one way or the other? Or
No.
very situational?
Now, I think I believe that we were headed towards the appointment the last time this happened before we received, I hate to use the word threat, but we were basically told that even if we did an appointment, that they would petition for a special election. So the council at that time chose a special election because they figured they were going to have to do it regardless. A special election costs the city anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, I believe was the last estimate I received. So again, an appointment, if everybody is comfortable with having somebody appointed, is probably the easiest and cheapest manner in which to do this.
Having someone with a long history of serving in the community, both as a council member and mayor, I can tell you, Deb, that the past situations when we've had this, the criteria that we used was the length of time. If, the council position is a 4-year term, if the position was within the first 2 years, we generally, in my recollection, had held a special election because you were filling a majority of a term. In other cases where it was either half a term or less, the council primarily chose the appointment method. From my perspective, with this being, and this actually is an interesting twist, the way the elections are changed. I don't believe there's a need for the additional expense. And having only had 3 people run for 2 seats in this past election, I feel fairly confident that we're not going to have a threat from any faction of the community to drive us to have a special election. And I think we should really consider the nomination or the appointment way of doing that and save ourselves some money.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't, and to Paul's point, if this was, 10 minutes after the last election and it was going to be, a majority of the term, that's one scenario. But in this case, I think appointment is perfectly appropriate.
Do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. So this is council action as needed. I'm hearing kind of a consensus in the direction here. You actually need a motion.
I would prefer a motion,
and vote.
just that I can share that with the auditor's office, if that's what we're trying to do. Basically, all your motion is we would like to proceed with the appointment process.
I would move that the Monterey City Council fill the vacancy created by the election of Mayor Weiser by appointment.
Is there a second? Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Ready to vote on this? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chris, do you communicate to the Sun about this opening, or how does this?
Yeah, we will actually put a public hearing, I have to put a public hearing notice together for
Okay.
it. And then we'll communicate that to the Sun. And then, obviously my hope is that this will be a rather large article in the next paper that we're seeking an appointment for individuals interested in being appointed to city council.
Thank you. Anything else on that topic? Move on to police officer pay adjustments. Chief Shannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Council A, we've been discussing for a lengthy period of time about police officer pay and the recent changes and being experienced in law enforcement with pays and different local departments offering bonus packages, a lot of different incentive programs, trying to hire officers in a very difficult time for that. And so upon review of a lot of different, some studies and different research around our area, I compared that with our union contract with where our officers are at. So the letter I put in front of you today with the pay rates is what I would really caution is a first step of a much larger discussion. This is something that we can do immediately to impact our officers, make them probably more fairly compensated for their years of service for where they're at. And it's been a tradition since I've been chief as well for getting people into that competitive pay rate for what they're doing and what they're faced. Just to kind of give you a little understanding of our union contract, our pay rate is set up in officers hired at a probationary rate if they're uncertified. We also have a patrol 1, which is after 1 year of service. They go to patrol 2 after 3 years of service, and then patrol 3 after 5 years of service. And that's it. That's where officers here top out after 5 years of service. The only pay increases they get after that are annual council-approved, union-negotiated pay raises from that standpoint. When I started here, it wasn't really an issue because it was a 2-year turnaround department from that standpoint. Now, I'm fortunate to say we have many officers in that 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 years of service. And so our contract probably doesn't really line up very well with that. And so that's been challenging from our perspective, from where we're at. When you compare those position pay rates in the contract to some recent studies, our probationary, our patrol 1s probably fall in less than the 25th percentile for other departments. So we're starting out lower than almost everybody from that perspective. Our top end is close to that 75th percentile, somewhere in that ballpark. That's just pay. Now, when you bring in all the other portions of the pay package, you can see, that's a deeper conversation I think we need to have from that. That being said, that is why I brought this proposal. Our officers are continually being contacted by other agencies. And so what my belief is whatever we can do to compensate them, retain the good employees that we have. I believe we have great officers who are committed to the community and trying to keep them here and make our pay as competitive as we can. So the proposal I have in front of you is bumping up our 3 patrol 2s to a patrol 3. 2 of those we inherited from Lisbon. You remember the conversations, Paul, you probably don't, as we come in, but they were over in Lisbon since 2017. And so we recognized their time in service for Lisbon to account towards their time. So they will be hitting their 5-year mark this year anyway. Officer Blinks is the other one that falls into that category. He also is hitting the Patrol 3 time frame this year as well. And then the 4th person, Officer Beeler, has what I've traditionally done there as well. When we hired Officer Mailer as a certified police officer, we brought him in at a Patrol 2 level for pay, which is kind of consistent when we bring him in. Officer Blinks, we sent to the academy. Once he was certified through the academy, went through a probationary period and successfully completed the FTO program. We bumped him to Patrol 2 as well. Emily is the same way. We're trying to do the same thing for Emily that we've done consistently in the past for that. Is just bumping her up to a Patrol 2. She's successfully completed. She's completed her first year, December 14th, I believe. In that year, attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy, graduated from there, took a leadership role at the academy with her class, and then successfully came back, successfully completed the entire FDO program in a COVID world, pandemic world, a racial world, all that kind of challenges that she's faced with us. And so I firmly believe and feel that these are all fair and ask for your support. Well, if I remember correctly, she was a reserve officer prior to.
She was a reserve officer for approximately 1 year. She started as an internship, and then a reserve officer with us, made a whole dollar that year, and then into the full-time category with us. Absolutely.
Keep in mind that, just going to elaborate on what Doug was saying, this is a stopgap measure. 5 years ago, when I put forth a memo in regards to staffing, one of my concerns about the proposed changes to collective bargaining was this potential arms race that we are witnessing now, again, was my career before. So communities that can are putting $4,000 and $5,000 signing bonuses out there. There's a community that is within 15 minutes that is paying health insurance for retirees until they reach Medicaid age. None of this I ever would have expected to see when I started my career. Collective bargaining was pretty tight. Both sides would go at it in good faith. And it's not just Cedar Rapids metro communities that I'm concerned about now. I'm seeing Manchester and Independence and communities that are kind of in between, that are on an island to a certain extent by themselves, offering moving expenses and things that we just normally wouldn't think to put in a contract for officers' pay, generally speaking. So this is something that we can do now while we're waiting to get a fifth council person and look at something, on a much larger scale. We're in our we will start the final year of our contract in July. I do not believe we are going to be able to make it through that last year of this contract without having some tougher conversations about compensation. So, Jeff and Amy been great hires, again, due to the combination of going over with Lisbon. They have a lot of years of service. Quite frankly, they deserve to go up right now, as does Jason. All 4 of the officers are worth their weight and are constantly being counted. So what we attempt to do is keep it close as we can without breaking our bank, but giving them a reason to think about staying here versus making the jump into Cedar Rapids, one of the other metro communities. And so far we won a few and lost one. We're not going to win them all, but when you have to spend, it used to be $5,000, it's probably closer to $7,000 or $8,000 now to send an officer through training, and as soon as they walk out the door, there's a line of other departments that are waiting to get their hands on it, and they don't care. They'll pay off your schooling, whatever you go, because it's a timing issue now. They don't have to wait the number of weeks to send you through those classes. So we're going to have to do our part. It's just kind of where we're at. The baby boomer generation is starting to leave the workforce. On the public side of things, it's going to get interesting. We don't have to put any more than 3% on the table. I'm already seeing communities at 3.5%, 4%, because cost of living has gone up, and they're justifying it that way. And I'm going, I just want to throw the rule book out the window, because that's what we're going to do for the next couple of years.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen in law. I mean, it's just the times of what it is right now. And so I'm trying to get in front of it as much as we can while we're waiting for the negotiation process to take a deeper dive into some of that. And we can absorb some of that change now, and I think as we should.
So again, harkening back to my experience, I was here when we were a 2-year and out department, and I also fortunately was here during a period of time where we turned that around, and I'm very pleased, number one, that we achieved the goal of bringing Lisbon and Mount Vernon together. I don't know if I said that to you yet, but as one who worked very hard for several years to get that done, and now having accomplished that, I'm grateful that that's been done. We're seeing this also in every industry, so it's not a shock. And I can tell you that law enforcement is not an easy job. I have a brother who served in federal law enforcement for years, And as we've seen over the last several years, it's not gotten easier, that's for sure. And when you have good people who are properly trained and are willing to serve in your community, if I'm going to sacrifice dollars here or there, I'm completely willing to sacrifice the dollars on the human resources that we have.
It's our most valuable asset.
Yep. That's my position.
Any questions, Doug?
Thank you.
I don't know what sort of impact I have on this, but I know some
Welcome to your input.
speak up, but the public works crew and myself, have a working relationship with everyone on the force. First and foremost, the great leadership of Chief. It says it all, but I can't say enough good things about all the officers we have. We work with them on a daily basis most of the time. So I don't know what kind of merit that has, but I appreciate them. I think all of them are a great asset to the city, and I don't want to lose any of them.
Thank you.
Thanks for explaining the marketplace in that field. This is something we need to take council action on.
I think that,
Well, my perspective is we would pay far more to try to onboard and acquire additional resources than the value that we're talking about spending here. So from that point of view, I think that is a no-brainer. It makes complete sense.
well, I do want to point out before you take a vote too, in case you are asked, we're still capable of doing this and keep the levy rate the same. So I think it's important to point out that we've been able to do this through innovation and growth and a few other things, and keep the levy rate at $12.99 for the last 6 years. So, that will be the goal, obviously, moving forward. But again, just like everything else, costs are going up, and we're just starting to witness it at the public sector side.
I appreciate that bringing that up. That's I know we would spend more to on board. So with that, I would make a motion to approve the pay adjustments as outlined by Chief Shannon.
And I'll second.
Thank you, Paul and Deb. Any final questions or comments? Matt, you want to weigh in? Everybody else wants to say something.
I don't like it, officer. You don't like it.
Finally, somebody said.
Speak of the truth.
He's not the only one.
A motion on the floor to approve the police officer pay adjustments as recommended by Chief Shannon. If you're ready to vote, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, council.
Proceed. Forst. Chief Shannon, anything else to add to the
I actually do.
police report?
Oh, here we go.
I know. Kind of a Parks and Rec day. Because it is kind of a Parks and Rec day.
It's fair.
Nothing to add to the report that you have in front of you. I do want, I mentioned last council meeting that we were going to try and do a cocoa with cops. And we are going to try to do that this upcoming Saturday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. up in front of the old fire station. Working out logistics, but that's kind of the game plan for right now. So you might see a pop-up sign and some cocoa for there for a couple hours. So that is the one day when it actually warms back up to about 22 degrees instead of being 18 below the night or the day before. So we are hoping that with the nice warm up of 22 degrees on Saturday, that the press hill will be a very active and busy spot. So we encourage families and kids and everybody. We're going to try and open up the old fire station a little bit. It's got some heat in there, so they can come in a little bit, talk to the officers that are there, and do cocoa with cops.
Thank you, Chief.
Right.
Public Works, anything to add, Eldon?
No. Other than I apologize for being so late with my report.
You got a pretty good excuse. That's fine. Excuse that.
We just finished up the water main break, about 20 minutes before I came in here tonight, actually. So it's just been nonstop for a couple of weeks now.
Where was
That
that?
was that at Highway 1 and Third?
Yes, yep.
I was wondering, I saw the crew out around noon, and they were still there around 5, so,
Yes.
It's never good when you see dirt in the back of a dump truck
yeah.
in January, February.
We happened to drive by, and my daughters were wondering, and I said, well, the only reason you dig an island in January in the town is a water main break, so.
Well, and we're a little short staffed between either vacation or somebody being sick for the last few weeks, and today, consequently, I was in the dump truck for a little while, hauling some materials, so among a number of other things. So again, I apologize for getting my report in late. But
Tom, Deb's got a question or comment too?
Yes, Deb?
Oh, I was just gonna say, remind Eldon to put the mic in front of him, mic and hearing.
sorry, Deb.
Thank you all for your work and your department's work. Multiple areas here. Mr. Snyder, anything to add to Parks and Rec Department?
Nothing to add, sir.
We're on discussion items. CIP budget discussions. Mr. Rich.
Nothing to really add. Like I said, we've got a CIP that has placeholder projects, and we'll kind of see how the end of this fiscal year and then the beginning of next fiscal year plays out.
All we can do for now. And two under discussion is decline ban. Ms. Akin.
So, both the mayor and I have received requests to consider an ordinance that would outlaw the practice of declawing cats inside the city limits. You've been provided a packet of information along with a DVD from the individual that has made the request. I did not put this in my report. I have all sorts of concerns with an ordinance of this type, but I don't want to dismay or get you to not consider this in full. So I knew I wouldn't give you the DVD until tonight, so if you want to take an opportunity to review that, I think they're looking through the ordinances in the state legislature. I mean, it's not an IO yet. I would be concerned about how it would be addressed here, whether or not that would put us in a legal battle. That if there were a number of cities that were going in and the League of Cities were going to jump in on this and weigh in, then I would say fine. My concern is I don't want to be a lone wolf out there trying to fight various organizations on this. That is my take. But again, there's plenty of information, including a DVD for your review. And essentially at this time, we just need to know, it's up to council if you want to further pursue an ordinance of this type. We can have a city attorney go through the process of creating one and then giving his recommendation. I kind of feel like I know what he's going to say, but we'll wait to see what we want to do.
Chris is just glancing over this initially. Obviously, I see some background on ordinances, but is there any information you've been given on how this is monitored and policed?
I haven't been able to determine whether or not any of these ordinances have been actually adopted
Okay.
or state laws passed. Considered, but I don't know that they've actually pressed through with them. You know, for instance, you have a proposed ordinance from the city of Boston. There, I think there would be a situation where you have a city large enough that you might be able to make some headway. But again, you're not going to necessarily outlaw the practice. You're going to outlaw the practice from our vet clinics that locate inside the city of Mount Vernon. And they only have to drive 15 minutes to have a practice done elsewhere. So, again, there are concerns that I have, generally speaking, just from an enforcement standpoint, but I will try to verify if any of these have actually been adopted.
Because it's noted, I mean, she stated in here that cities have banned it in her letter. But is that by ordinance? Is that by a statement? I'm just curious to know how that's different.
My assumption that they ban it has been by ordinance. Some states, it's easier to address animal-related issue in some states, but Iowa is not one.
Right. Okay.
Fundamentally, I don't know, fundamentally, I have a problem with us, I don't know jack about cats and being a veterinarian and when it's appropriate and when it's not. And that's why, to me, I and I think other cities and council members, public officials, lean on folks like the American Veterinary Association and law enforcement and the plumbers and the electric, they know their thing and they know what the right way to do things is and what the wrong way to do things is. And I just don't, at a fundamental level, it doesn't feel like something that we need to be waiting on. It's just where I'm at.
I did invite the petitioner to attend this session, so we're in a meeting. And for her, I gave her directions to what building we're going to be meeting and what time we're going to continue to be on the agenda. So, and to Scott's point, this may be a little bit of a function of a new mayor learning how reactive or unreactive to be to certain things, quite frankly, about it.
I don't, and if that was the impression that I gave, I don't want to, because I think it so rarely people engage with us that when they do, I think it's worthy of us providing a hearing. It just doesn't seem like the sort of thing that we should be doing. So,
Yeah, so, case in point, anybody in the community can petition or that has an interest in our community can ask that we consider ordinances. The reason that we go this route, just so that everybody's keenly aware on the discussion side of things, is if there's not enough interest, say there's not 3 of you that says, I would strongly consider the ordinance if it, is legal, so on and so forth, there's an expense on more controversial ordinance. So I will write a lot of the ordinances that aren't controversial, but as soon as we kick it over to the attorney, there's a whole other cost and expense that goes through. And if there isn't at least 3 of you that would be willing or would like to consider this, then I think it's kind of a moot point. We have this discussion item and everybody has their ability to provide the information and make their case. So I would definitely encourage individuals to continue to bring items like this forward if they have concerns. It's just, this route is the most inexpensive way for council to have a discussion and decide if it's something that they want to pursue in the future without taking formal action.
So Chris, is another avenue for this, if the council doesn't think we want to pursue, could the petitioner gather other petitioners and bring it back to our attention again? Is that another avenue that can happen?
Yeah, I think the more support from community members, the easier it is for you to justify at least going through the expense. All of the concerns that I brought forward tonight, I don't think necessarily go away. However, the justification for going through that expense, I do believe becomes more plausible if more individuals, are making the case that they would like to see this happen.
Yeah. I mean, I sit here and say, is this a huge, I just don't have the frame of reference of how big, prevalent, pervasive, problematic this situation is. I don't have a cat.
I've talked to
I don't
people.
know.
One of the concerns that some of the individuals that won't come out and make a statement are is, yes, the process can be painful. and I do believe that responsible pet owners take that into consideration, but I think some of the concern is that individuals won't take cats into their homes if they have claws and, you know, the potential to destroy. So there are a couple individuals that I've talked to, there's concern, you know, they're not necessarily in favor of the process, but they are concerned about what will happen to animals if people start to not take them in. And so there's a lot of discussion points, I think, that revolve around this particular subject. It's just a tricky one in Iowa, I think.
Well, I always have concerns with enforcement when we wade into some of these types of ordinances, and frankly, there's ordinances on our books today that were passed with good intentions and they're not enforced because either we didn't put a good enforcement mechanism in it, or we didn't delegate who was the enforcer. And frankly, one of the things that I've considered doing with my next 4 years with council is considering reviewing some of our ordinances and cleaning up some of those that may not, you know, may really not be needed and were done not for the right reasons at the end of the day. And part of it's, you know, when Scott talked about, you know, our job's not just to think about today, but the future. You know, what the conditions were 20 years ago and what the conditions are today, in certain instances are different. And, you know, our code of ordinances aren't static. You know, we should consider those types of things as we look at these. But again, I agree, we do not want to, you know, send a message that we're not willing to listen. Because, you know, it's important that people feel they can bring us their concerns, but we have to do it thoughtfully and mindfully, and really consider the long-term ramifications and you know, what's being asked of us. So, thank you.
Let me frame it this way. Are there 3 council members that would support now looking into this more, getting more public input? Or is this something we want to hold off on until we hear more down the road or it becomes a bigger issue in Iowa? Here, Scott's willing to hold off at this point in time until this becomes more of an issue and learn more about it?
Yeah, I at this point wouldn't be able to support it. I'm going to do everything I can to learn about it because, you know, I've had cats and I've had them deployed. We've done that for very specific reasons and you know, it's in some ways, I now think, gee, should we have done that or should we? I can tell you that my couches appreciate it. But I do want to learn more about the issue, but at this point I wouldn't be able to support anything.
Same here, I agree. I felt like, you know, I appreciated her letter and in the process, she's educated me on some things that I did not know. And so I appreciate that. And I also was thinking about, you know, what Deb was saying about, I think it's important for us to encourage involvement from our community members. But I think, to Deb's point, there's always that opportunity for them to sort of gather other people that have common interests because it makes it easier for us to deal with.
Thank you. The message here, is that appropriate to pass on?
Please.
Deb, did you have anything to add?
No, I was just agreeing with, I said,
Thank you.
please.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure this is
on in some form, what would be the committee that this would fall underneath?
Public safety.
Okie dokie.
We
Thank you.
revisit the consent agenda?
Yes, and from an enforcement standpoint, the only feasible way that I see this moving forward would be under public safety. However, I have zero idea, and I'm not trying to be mean. I really do not know how our officers would go about trying to investigate or enforce a situation like this.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah,
I'm
I think-
puzzled by that.
Again, it's one of those issues, especially like I said, and cognizant of the fact of the state that we live in and some of the laws that are being introduced at the state level to counter people going in and doing undercover, things like that. I mean, it complicates this matter from an enforcement standpoint. And again, I would say that if more citizens in the community stepped forward and voiced their opinion, then maybe it would be an opportunity then to kind of take that. But everybody has to understand the ramifications of taking on, the first in the state approach to a code. If other communities come along with us and we share the burden of cost, fine, but it can be quite expensive for the community to go out on an island. And very rarely do you see a community the size of 4,500 people be that one individual.
We don't even know what the scope of this issue is within our veterinarian community.
I will say that I'm
Say
anxious,
that, you say that.
I'm anxious to watch the DVD. I have a feeling that it's going to be a lot like the movie that talked about CTE, and I'm going to rethink my entire past.
We exhausted number 2. Let's move on to number 3, dog park review, Parks and Rec. Pretty succinct response. First point, decided after discussion that separate dog park is not necessary. And number 2, if you want to continue.
It's pretty simple. We did take a look at the signage that's out there. There's no visible phone number to contact anybody from a non-emergency or emergency standpoint, so I'll work with Chief Shannon on what he wants it to read, how he wants it to read out there.
So
Yes,
would the emergency number be 911?
it would,
Okay.
but not everybody may know that at the time.
Well, and I think the idea being that there are, if somebody gets bit or a dog is being attacked, that's an emergency. If you go and there's aggressive dogs and it's making it inappropriate for others to be around, is that an emergency? Is it, does that rise to a 911 kind of question?
Well, it's going to depend on the person that's out there.
Certainly, as it always does, yes.
If we've got a little dog, a miniature chihuahua out there, if they go in the pincher, they may feel like there's an emergency going on, but something hasn't happened. So that's something that's out of our hands, but as long as we provide both opportunities, I feel, we've covered our bases. So whether it rolls over to dispatch after hours or whether it goes directly to the non-emergency number, we've at least provided those resources. That's what we're concerned about, that's what we're looking at. We felt we put it on the inside of the fence because that's where the people are. Not when they walk up to the fence because they're not paying attention to signage right now. I can tell you that right now. But once they enter inside the fence, they can see it easily and identify it.
I was just going to say, I think it's genius.
Sense.
It's one of those things where, why didn't we do that when we put it apart? But, so I appreciate the Parks and Rec doing their due diligence and looking at this, and I think that's an excellent solution.
I will say that the paperwork that people received when they signed up for licenses did have information in regards to calling the non-emergency number, but we no longer do that, so.
Well, and let's face it, when I got that,
Yeah. Where did it go? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I will say that, you're witnessing the age of confrontation though, and I think one of the challenges that we city, our officers in general, are an abundance of misinformation, an abundance of misinterpretation of the law, and two, just an apparent belief that, you can approach and say and do things to people. And so the recommendation is kind of a stair-step scenario. So we start here, and if it continues to escalate in the future, then we might have to try more invasive measures. But to a certain extent, we've talked about this at the department head level. I own a small dog. I have to take some responsibility if we're going to be at the park if a large dog comes in to know where my dog is at. And there's responsibilities for both owners there. So one of the challenges I think we're running into is this idea of exclusive use. And the thought that I was here first, so I should be able to do this. So we are transitioning in how we have discussions with individuals, and we're spending a lot more time kind of going back through education materials to say, true, nah, don't believe what you just heard on the internet. So we're adapting.
I do have one question though, from the last discussion, and that is with people leaving their dogs there alone. Has there been any?
I approached Chief Shannon about if he had any calls in regards to that, and their answer was,
We've had 0 calls for any dog issues at the dog park. Since the last meeting, I've sat down there probably for an hour on 4 or 5 different occasions just to see what usage, and there's no usage at the park when I was there during the daytime, which of course, I'm there. So there's the deterrent factor from that standpoint anyway, but again, kind of going back to the enforcement aspects of everything that you're dealing with and what we're trying to confront, is people's interpretation of what they determine is vicious or what is vicious or what actually meets the code definition. If you have 2 dogs in the same area that don't know each other, there's going to be some type of an exchange most likely. If it's a Chihuahua and a Rottweiler, that's common and as they go through from that standpoint. So what does that escalate to? Where is it at? And so just going back to what Matt was saying, I always encourage 895-6141 rolls over. If we're here, we answer it. If we're not, it rolls over to our dispatch and we can come out and talk and see what's going on immediately. That's always when it's easiest, because when everything is going on and it's right there. We can talk to people, we can see what did you see, and kind of look a little more and gather a little more information. Going behind the scenes and days later, we're done.
Yeah, most of the interaction that I see when 2 dogs get together have to do with the nose and another part of the anatomy.
Saying hello.
back to Russ, I have no witness to that, I haven't heard anything out of it, and one time somebody approached me and said that that's what was going on, so I don't think we have a problem. I think it was just a situation at one time.
I did see it after, personally. I felt it, but this has been 4 or 5 years ago.
You did see that occur?
Yes, yes.
To clarify what that is, where somebody just left their dog?
No,
Or just
not
aggressive behavior?
leaving the dog,
Okay.
but aggressive behavior.
Oh,
Kids
And
were
my
there.
question was specifically leaving the dog. If
Yeah,
we've had
on
any-
that issue, I can,
Okay, yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, but you have seen aggressive behavior, yeah, sure. I've seen
It
it
was a
too.
case where it was, probably young teenagers who brought the dog in and then didn't control it very well.
We just had a recent court case. We cited a person in a neighboring community of ours that we police for a dog at large violation, which is a similar code to what we have. And the dogs were released. Some other animals were killed as a result from that. And it all comes down to knowingly allowing, and the court dismissed the ticket, dismissed the charge because it wasn't knowingly allowed to be at large from that standpoint too. So accidents are going to happen, dogs are going to run off their properties. It's, owners, we try to identify it in code as much as we can to go from there, but it's challenging at best.
Well, I walk my dog around the neighborhood, and there's other dogs that walk around it too. There's some aggressive behavior going on there, so it's not just the dog park, it happens elsewhere, so.
Right.
But we'll do our best to at least give people an option and a resource, and let them go from there. And spend Doug's time sitting in a parking lot, eating donuts and drinking coffee.
Absolutely. Power rings.
Matt, before you leave, do you want to give an update on the pool RFPs?
Yeah, we received 5 pool RFPs. We chose 3 of those companies to interview coming up on February 10th. The other 2 will leave in the background in case something good happens with the first 3. Do I get specific or?
No, I think individually, if you want to ask questions. The good news is getting 5 is
Yeah.
And the nice thing is the 3 that we chose, as far as from a dollar amount, are right within $2,000 of each other. So we feel we got it right in that regards too.
Yeah.
And as a general reminder, this RFP is basically a pool study to look at what we have, the population, what we might need going forward, next steps, that kind of thing.
kind of threefold. We have an existing pool that obviously is old and has issues. We have an LVC that, if people remember, had the potential for phase 2 for an indoor. So really, the recommendation has been, what do we do? And once we determine what we can feasibly afford, essentially, then we move into that next stage on if it's build a brand new pool, when can we even consider that?
Where's it go?
Yes, I mean, so the
And
study.
filling in all those blanks
I
that
did-
we've all been bandying about. for a while.
Yeah, I will say that the study is going to be north of $50,000, just to not shock anybody sitting around the table, because it is fairly inclusive, and we do get somewhat definitive in what we're seeking here.
Revenue projections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Location, amenities, indoor, outdoor combo, some other options. So we're going to put in front of you a lot of information, what we've asked them to provide, and it's going to be pretty detailed. Our hope is it's going to be pretty detailed. Most of them are forecasted at least 11 months to a year of time spent in the community finding out information from public and from private, or from public and city individuals. So.
And I don't want to take any, Councilperson Herman's been on the original committee, but I think really what it boiled down to, now that the LVC is constructed, and we're not trying to marry the 2 conversations, we can have an actual study that looks at, yes, you can add to the LVC with an indoor structure, it's going to cost you this, or it has the potential to, make or lose this amount of money. Can you stomach that? The existing facility obviously can be, potentially renovated, maybe not. And what happens with that? But then there's amenities that go along with it, and there needs to obviously be a lot of public input opportunities. And it's definitely nice to have a third-party group kind of leading us through that versus staff. So I will say that regardless of what we do, my expectation is this stands a solid chance, obviously, to be a vote of the people on whether or not they want to move this project forward and at what cost. So getting their input now would be extremely beneficial. And again, it's not clouding the conversation of one large complex. And I think going back and reading the previous reports when we were looking at the LVC, there's no way to answer that question without addressing both. And people quickly latched on to the potential losses of an indoor pool and just trying to intentionally sink that project. So yeah, we have an opportunity here. To be honest with you, there are other organizations within our community, Cornell being one of them, that may have some interest in being part of this conversation as well. So we need to have a thorough understanding of what the price tag would be, location, and what we'd be looking at. With that being said, within the next 5 years, we are going to have to decide to do something. Because our existing pool is not just nickel and diming us anymore. It is more like robbing, each of our pockets.
Back to the dog park, thanks for following up on that.
Thanks for the quick reply and specific action steps. Okay, thank you.
And we'll think of something else to do later.
I think we got it. Any other council reports, committee reports, city administrators report? Chris?
Nothing really to add. I'm anxious to see Laura's going to be working with Green Iowa AmeriCorps just on a couple of projects and basically doing an inventory of the community.
You explain what that is.
So my first involvement with Green Iowa AmeriCorps in Vernon, they came and did an energy audit, looked around City Hall, and determined that we were ahead of the times in regards to where we were at. Now, on a much grander picture, they are partnering with the University of Northern Iowa. One of the actions for under $1,000, I think the study was roughly about $1,000, to do a carbon study for the community. I think that would be an interesting starting point for sustainability and something that is near and dear to a lot of people in the community. So it is really, like I said, through their partnership with the University of Northern Iowa, it's environmental focused, sustainability focused. How do we start taking steps, obviously, to become essentially more green? Kind of cliche, but that's the path that we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. That concludes the agenda items that we have here until we go into a closed session. Is there anything else that we need to have accomplished in open session? Motion to move into closed session.
I'll second.
Move and second. All in favor of the motion of going into closed session at 8:02, or let's say closing this meeting out at 8:03. All in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Thanks for coming out in excellent boots.